And in a return to the night's big political story, the Iowa caucuses, Shields and Brooks are here with me in the studios of Iowa Public Television just outside Des Moines. That is syndicated columnist Mark Shields and New York Times columnist David Brooks. Gentlemen, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you, Judy.
Here in Iowa. So, David, you know, we've been watching these candidates throughout the campaign. Tonight, the voters are finally going to weigh in. But let's look back at what we've learned about these in Iowa. 5 men and 1 woman. What have we learned about them over the course of this campaign?
Well, the big macro story is that it's much more likely that Mitt Romney is going to get the nomination because the 2 people who were really his long-run challengers were Rick Perry and Newt Gingrich, and they have not, according to the polls, done so well. And so Mitt Romney is still very likely. The micro story is Rick Santorum's rise. And I think that's a big story. And it's partly because there have just always been a lot of social conservatives here. They've been looking, and the time's up. They had to make a decision. And according to the Des Moines Register polls, they've gone with Santorum. And the second thing is that he's not only getting the social conservatives, he's doing a lot better among people without high school degrees who make up the majority of the electorate among Republicans. And Mitt Romney has always nationwide had trouble with those people. And one thing, Santorum hits them on the social issues, but also on the economic issues. I'm not a supply setter. I'm not a corporate conservative. More active role for government enhancing manufacturing jobs and things like that. So his big job tonight is to show I'm not just about abortion. I've got this populist economic message I'm selling too.
And Mark, I ask you about all these candidates because there are a lot of woulda, shoulda, couldas that people are talking about. If Rick Perry's campaign had been a different campaign, if he had been a different candidate, we'd be talking about something very different tonight.
No question, Judy, and that's the wonderful thing. I think Michael Beschloss used the term road tested in Iowa. And it's a place where candidates are road tested and they're examined. I mean, the Iowa voters are as welcoming and open as any people on the planet, but they do ask tough questions and they do make harsh judgments. And Rick Perry has been found wanting. He's a very effective candidate campaigning retail. That is, meeting people in small groups. He's quite affable and gregarious, but he's just died in public forums. And the idea of Newt Gingrich, at this point, he's considered the least knowledgeable candidate for the Republican side. Perry is, and while Newt is considered the most knowledgeable, but now there's up to almost a third of Republicans said they would not vote for Newt Gingrich if he's the nominee. Now, that's a consequence of $3.5 or $4 million of negative commercials and advertising against him. But I think that the sleeper story here is Iowa always winnows out as well as winnows in people, and that's Ron Paul. And Ron Paul is leading among independents 2-1. Mitt Romney.
And are they going to be voting?
Well, that's the question. That's the thing I think I'm looking for tonight is the size of the turnout. If the turnout is dramatically big, it was 119,000 Republicans voted and participated in 2008, which was a record. It eclipsed 1980. Then if you start to see that go up, that's probably independents, and that's probably people coming in who haven't been Republican activists in the past, and it's probably Ron Paul. You see a Ron Paul crowd, and it's like an old-time Democratic crowd. I mean, there's a lot of low-income people, a lot of young people, a lot of old people, some yuppies. It's a very eclectic group.
We remember that term. David, what about the independent vote? I mean, we are so focused covering these caucuses on the Republican Party, and we've made some mention of the Democrats, but there is this big chunk of the electorate in the state that's self-identified independent.
Right, and the Romney people feel that's their people. There are a lot of people who are disaffected from both parties. They're moderate, and they feel they're going to go to those people. And a lot of them, it's important to remember that they're still to be won over. That a lot of people go into these caucuses, and what they do, each candidate has a speaker. And a lot of people, sometimes as much as 30%, are still to be won over. And those people, I suppose, especially. And that's also worth emphasizing because there's sort of 2 events here. There's the results, which we'll learn about, but then there's the speeches after the results, which are even more important. Remember Barack Obama, after the Iowa caucuses, really got to broadcast. Then you get to tell the country what just happened. Remember, Jimmy Carter did not win the Iowa caucus in 1976, uncommitted won. Walter Mondale got 49%, but Gary Hart, who got 16%, somehow turned that into a victory by how he sold it. So the candidates will have their biggest audiences, especially the top three, and that's really the second big crucial event tonight.
Mark, are the candidates talking in this campaign about what the voters want to hear about? Is there a match, do you think?
Well, I'd say this, Judy. I'm not sure. I'm really not. But to David's point about Rick Santorum appealing to the evangelical, the born-again evangelical self-identified voters, they were 60% of the electorate last time. They're down to 30% this time. And I think that's in part, that the religious and moral issues are not no longer considered, but they aren't as central as even though Iowa has a lower unemployment. The economy is dominant, even though Iowa's unemployment rate is 3 points below that of the nation, and it remains so. So, but the candidate, I think, with the most consistent economic message, or emphasizing economic credentials, certainly has been Mitt Romney. And I'll be fascinated by what he says tonight, because I can remember that George Herbert Walker Bush, when he won here in 1980 and upset Ronald Reagan, the favorite, said, "I have Big Mo." And that meant nothing to voters. I mean, that meant nothing. He was talking about his campaign. And David's absolutely right. It's a key moment tonight. What does Rick Santorum say to them? He's introducing himself to the nation tonight with what he says. And they have to be careful. If they go after Ron Paul, if Mitt Romney goes after Ron Paul, which he hasn't done, he's been very careful not to, they're running the risk of a third party. And nobody thinks that a third party challenge led by Ron Paul is going to do anything except re-elect President Obama.
David, are these, I mean, I'm throwing out the questions that have occurred to me as I'm listening to you. Are these the same candidates they were when they started campaigning in Iowa? I mean, have they modified what they are talking about?
Mitt Romney's the same. He's just cruising, don't embarrass myself, don't commit to anything that I'm going to regret in the fall. He's stayed very disciplined and is the same. Rick Santorum is 9 times better. Just much cheerier, occasionally tells jokes. I went to a bunch of his events, really, having seen him campaign in Pennsylvania, much better candidate. He was here a lot, 370 town hall meetings will do that to you. So he's been the big improver. I would say Ron Paul doesn't really change. Audiences don't matter. He's going to give a speech to himself in a room or to 1,000 people. He hasn't changed. But I think what they have discovered, I've seen, when you can tell they react to heads nodding. And one of the things you see when heads are nodding, when people tie the economic issue to values issues, when they talk about the country losing its work ethic, losing its sense of responsibility, when they say the economy is not only about the recession, the financial crisis, but a sense that America's lost some value, economic values, that's what I see them all gravitating to. And so they do respond to those nodding heads.
This is where David and I disagree. What I think the country is always looking for is an upbeat conservative. And there are 2 kinds of conservatives, Judy. Those who view the world as 5 minutes to midnight, that things are bad and they're going to get worse, which I've heard more of from Santorum than you obviously have heard, or the 5 minutes to sunrise conservative. Things are bad, but together we can make things better. That was Ronald Reagan. That was Jack Kemp. That was Mike Huckabee. And I don't think anybody's grabbed that mantle in this race.
I would say the tenor of the electorate has changed dramatically from 4 years. It's much darker, much more pessimistic, and maybe they're reacting to that. Though, as a political analysis, being optimistic is rarely a bad thing.
One quick question about Michelle Bachmann. I mean, she did win the Iowa straw poll some months ago. She was on the rise, and the polls show, David, her support has just all but disappeared. And yet she's been out there, she's hit all 99 counties. What happened to her campaign?
Yeah, people just looked at her, and for whatever reason, there was no big cataclysmic event. They just decided not quite ready to be president. And so she's had some very humbling events where very few people have showed up. There's still the press gang around her. But the crucial thing is she said she's going on. And the lesson of Newt Gingrich's career is never drop out, because you never know what's going to happen. And that also is good for Mitt Romney, because all the anti-Romneys will still be around, apparently, in New Hampshire and South Carolina.
So there may not be the winnowing out that we've seen.
Yeah, that's the lesson.
Well, we'll have a chance to talk about this.
There will be, Judy.
Okay, there will be, there won't be.
There will be.
You'll have a chance to have another word on this tonight. Mark Shields, David Brooks, thank you both. Gwen.